What if I told you there is a tax you are paying right now? One that never shows up on your pay stub, never appears on your tax return, and most financial advisors will never mention it. That is quietly destroying everything you have saved. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how tariffs function as a hidden tax on ordinary people, why your savings are losing ground every single month, and the specific moves you must make before this goes any further. You are doing everything right. You budget carefully, you skip the expensive coffee, you watch what you spend at the grocery store. And yet, at the end of every month, your savings account looks almost identical to where it was a year ago. Prices keep climbing on things you cannot live without: food, electronics, clothing, car parts. You feel the pressure, but you cannot name the source. That invisible pressure has a name, and it is not inflation. Well, not entirely. There is something upstream causing all of it. Here's what the data actually shows. When tariffs rise by even 10% on imported goods, consumer prices follow within months, not years, months. American households lost an average of over $1,000 in purchasing power during the last major tariff cycle. That is money that came directly out of budgets already stretched thin. And here's the cruel part. The people who feel it most are not the wealthy. They spend a smaller fraction of income on goods. It is the middle class and working families absorbing the real hit quietly every single week. So what do most people do when they feel financially squeezed? They cut spending harder. They cancel subscriptions. They stop eating out. They put more into savings. And financial influencers cheer them on. But here's the brutal truth. Extreme austerity in your personal budget does almost nothing when the structural cost of living is being artificially inflated at the source. You are bailing out a sinking boat with a teaspoon while someone upstream keeps drilling holes. The problem is not your spending habits. The problem is a system you have never been taught to see. There is a reason this keeps happening that almost nobody in mainstream finance talks about openly. Every time a government imposes a tariff, a tax on imported goods, it frames it as protecting jobs, defending national industries, or punishing trade rivals. And maybe sometimes there's truth in that, but there is a consequence that never makes the headline. That cost does not disappear. It does not stay with the importer. It travels, silently and predictably, directly into the prices you pay at stores, on websites, in every corner of your daily life. You are the one absorbing it. Here's the core mechanism. A tariff is a tax paid by domestic importers when they bring goods across borders. But importers are businesses. Businesses do not absorb costs, they pass them on. So the importer raises prices to the wholesaler raises prices to the retailer raises prices to you. This is called tariff pass-through, and economists have documented it extensively. The entire chain moves, and you sit at the very end of it with no ability to opt out. Your paycheck stays the same, your savings buy less. Month after month, the gap quietly widens. Now here's where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. High net worth investors and institutions do not sit at the end of that chain absorbing the damage. They own the beginning of it. They hold equity in companies that raise prices. They invest in commodities that spike when trade wars ignite. They hold real assets, land, infrastructure, businesses, whose value rises when paper money buys less. While your cash savings quietly erode, their portfolio appreciates. Not because they are smarter, because they understand which side of the tariff equation to stand on. And nobody taught you which side that was. Let us look at this with real numbers. During the 2018 to 2019 tariff escalation, Federal Reserve economists estimated that American consumers bore approximately 90% of the total tariff cost. Not foreign exporters, not corporations at large, consumers. Researchers at Columbia and Princeton found that tariffs on washing machines alone added an average of $86 to every unit sold domestically. The steel tariffs raised costs across automotive, construction, and appliance industries simultaneously. This is not theory. This is documented economic transfer, wealth moving from your pocket to somewhere else, engineered at the policy level. Here is the single reframe that changes everything. Stop thinking of yourself as a consumer trying to save money in a broken system. Start thinking of yourself as a capital allocator who decides where your resources sit inside that system. Consumers lose when prices rise. Capital allocators who own productive assets, businesses, commodities, real estate, dividend-paying equities, often gain. The tariff storm that erodes your cash also drives up the value of the things that generate cash. The question is no longer, how do I spend less? The question is, how do I position myself on the producing side of this equation? Principle 1. Stop letting inflation and tariff exposure sit entirely in cash. A savings account paying 2 or 3% while tariff-driven inflation runs at 5 or 6 is not saving. It is a slow, guaranteed loss in purchasing power. The first move is to audit what percentage of your net worth is sitting in cash or low-yield instruments right now. If that number is above 20% of your long-term savings, you are overexposed. You do not need to become a sophisticated trader. You need to begin migrating a portion of your capital toward assets that carry pricing power, things whose price rises when everyone else's costs rise. Principle 2. Build geographic and asset diversification as a direct hedge against trade policy risk. When one country imposes tariffs, the retaliation cycles back. Sectors and geographies get hit unevenly. Investors who hold assets only in one country, in one currency, in one sector, are fully exposed to every policy swing. Consider broad index funds with international exposure. Consider commodity-linked assets. Consider inflation-protected securities. This is not about exotic investing. This is about making sure that no single government's trade decision can take down everything you own simultaneously. Spread the exposure. Reduce the single point of failure. Principle 3. Develop the habit of reading trade policy as a leading indicator for your personal finances, not just as political news. Most people read tariff announcements the way they read sports scores, interesting, forgotten in an hour. But each major tariff action sends a clear signal about which sectors will face cost pressure within months. When steel tariffs go up, automotive and construction follow. When agricultural tariffs rise, food producers and packaged goods reprice. If you build the habit of connecting policy announcements to price impacts with even a 60-day lag, you gain a genuine edge in your purchasing and investment decisions that most people never develop. Now here's where people go wrong when they start applying this. The first mistake is panic-driven overreaction, dumping all cash into gold or commodities the moment tariffs hit the news. That is reactive, not strategic. Markets price in anticipated tariffs quickly. You are usually too late the second you read the headline. The second mistake is treating every tariff as permanent. Trade policy cycles. What goes up in tension often comes back down. Locking yourself into high-cost hedges during peaks destroys the advantage. The discipline is in positioning gradually, systematically, well before the crisis, not during the noise. Here's what you do this week, not someday, this week. Day 1. Pull up your complete financial picture and calculate what percentage is sitting in cash or savings accounts. Day 2. Research one broad international index fund or inflation-protected bond ETF available through your current brokerage. Day 3. Set a news alert for the words tariff and trade policy so you begin seeing these announcements. Day 7. Move 5% of your idle cash savings, just 5%, into one diversified asset you identified. Then do it again next month. Slow and systematic beats fast and panicked every single time. Start with just one deliberate decision. Here's the question I want you to sit with and argue about in the comments. If tariffs function as a hidden tax paid almost entirely by domestic consumers, and the data is extremely clear on this, why do so many people across the political spectrum continue supporting them as if they only hurt the other country? Is it a failure of financial education, a deliberate framing by governments and media, or something else entirely? I am genuinely curious what you think. Drop your answer below and push back on each other. The conversation in the comments is usually more interesting than the video itself.